and often crisis situations. It was quite led by politics. There's an interesting model called PMP model, which is politics, media politics model. And that's kind of the media is be following that particular path, which is not particularly productive or healthy when you are dealing with disasters. So essentially, I have outlined three kinds of disasters: one a natural, a humanitarian disaster. I'm sorry.
No, sir. No, sir. Carry on, sir. Carry on.
Okay, so I have outlined three kinds of disaster: a humanitarian disaster, a natural disaster, and of course, a pandemic that we're all living in together. And if you look at these disasters, you see there are some common trends across these ones. Number one, the kind of reporting that was done on all these disasters, you'll find that it's episodic, it's spot stories, it's what's happening right now. And the coverage often we again find begins quite late. Um, Often wasting the pre-crisis stage, not used to prepare the community for disaster, taking preparatory measures, etc. There is less energy spent on interrogation of disaster. So to hold governments to account and question and scrutinize them, it will put actually most of that effort. Most of their effort is actually covering events, covering spot stories. They were saying, and probably is now is because of the kind of preparedness that news media have in reporting this disaster. I think the problem, I would say, is because news media treats a disaster, which I would argue is not a normal situation, but an extraordinary situation, the same kind of operationality and the same kind of values which it uses for ordinary times. So the kind of news values that you would apply and the way that you would function in a normal situation is being applied to an extraordinary situation. So the sensitivities are the same. The level of responsibility is also the same. And then therein we have a problem. And therein lies the main problem. So when we speak about news media preparedness and news media resilience, normally we end up speaking about the physical safety aspects of journalists. So these are the kind of issues that we normally discuss when we speak about preparedness. One is the question of physical safety itself. It is quite fundamental and quite important, of course, because primary concern is the reporters, the journalists, the news organizations, physical safety, as you know, whether it's the PPE or to make sure that the journalists are safe and protected. That is quite important, but this shouldn't be, the discussion should move beyond that. So then again, we speak about damage to infrastructure, and of course we speak about, now these days, at least in the recent years, we have begun to speak about trauma and mental well-being of the reporters while they are covering disasters. But I think this conversation needs to move much beyond that. I think there is reason, it's important that we also speak beyond the physical safety measures and speak about editorial resilience and editorial preparedness to better equip journalists for covering disasters. So resilience, it's a process by which individuals are able to positively adapt to substantial difficulties, adversity or hardship. That's a good way of thinking about it. So resilience is all about getting an outcome, getting a positive outcome in the face of adversity. And resilience is made possible by developing certain competencies, developing certain capacities, developing certain strengths. And the important thing that we need to remember when we speak about it, resilience, is probably the fact that it's not one thing. It's not by doing one thing that you become suddenly resilient. It's a series of things that you have to do. And it's never developed overnight. But it's actually needs to be seen as a process. That's what we need to keep in mind. And when we try and how do we apply this to news organizations so that they are resilient, they are better prepared to report in disaster, and crucially, By doing that, they're able to serve their societies better. Again, when we ask that question, it quite often boils down to the idea, of course, that actually there is a lot of money involved in it. And news organizations might not always have that kind of money, especially in Asia, in Nepal, for instance, or even in India, for that matter. But actually, I sort of want to differ from that, because it's not just about cost. Editorial resilience is not all about money or lack thereof. It's also about thinking, changing the way that we think. It's about editorial strategies and policies. It's about having contingency plans in place, and importantly, it's about acquiring a familiarity and the competence to implement these editorial measures and strategies across a disaster cycle, so that the effective can be. It's a thinking as well. It's not just about money. It's about finding different ways of working. It's about finding different kinds of solutions. It's about reporting about solutions as well. It's about asking different kinds of questions. It's about maybe putting aside the competitiveness of journalists to one side and collaborating during the disaster cycle. So it's quite a lot. It's about actually rethinking the way that we think about journalists. So what kind of editorial measures? I'm just about to conclude, guys. I know that I might be running a little over time. Let's look at some of these editorial measures that journalists could implement. So, of course, the question and professional operational contingency plans, so making sure that there are stages well before the disaster, so that disaster, there's a plan in place for this. About establishing redundancy locations for newsrooms. For instance, in the Nepal situation, so a lot of the newsrooms were completely, they didn't have a place to work from. So when you have a thinking and putting in place, okay, fine, this happens, so where do we actually publish our stories? We'll move to X location or Y location. So, and important, again, the third point is crucial, I think. It's about having regulations within news organizations, within media houses, about the government's disaster policies and interrogating that. Okay? Is actually scrutinized. They're questioned about the policies or the lack thereof. It's also risk mitigation. Might be collaborating with other news organizations so that you can come together during a disaster situation. It's about training, building capacity for specifics of training. It could be about physical training, but it needs to go beyond that as well. It could be about establishing peer support networks for journalists. They can help each other. For me, the two points that drive that I want to underline is good disaster journalism is made to last by preparedness. And editorial preparedness needs to be in both aspects. We need to be thinking much more expansively about disasters. We need to be thinking about disasters not just a single event, but a complex systems that are quite interconnected. In preparedness, in the physical and structural state that normally for conversation. And we need to be thinking about it not just in the disaster. It's not one of it. It needs to be process which involves continual actions. It needs to stress disaster events to effect risk reduction and overall bring together or strengthen the news resilience to tackle any disasters. Okay, thank you for that. I'll stop there.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your detailed information on journalism in the time of disaster, and also for sharing your findings of your surveys. It was very informative. Now let us move on to the question answer session. Before that, I would like to request the participants to kindly put up your questions in the question box and not to unmute yourselves. I will. There a question for Shindu, sir. Hello, sir.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes. So, media is the first time information providers to the public. Is there any single window system of data information available at the national, state, and district level, which is more trustworthy?
If will have national disaster management policies, I would, and they have disaster bodies as well. And I guess this is one of the areas where you have to, what you would call the official numbers, etc. You would be able to get. So it's a difficult question for me to answer looking across which country are we speaking about. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
So you could take India as an example.
Is it more trustworthy or less trustworthy? What's the question again? Could you repeat that?
Most trustworthy.
I am not very sure whether any government figures is where it's a starting point. Any national figures, that's what you start with really. But of course, journalists should be looking beyond that. It's always in the interest of bodies to be not even possible for the governmental bodies to accurate figures. We need to be interrogating every bit of information that you would be getting, I would say. Point. Just about and making figures up or etc. Be using that as a basic starting point, and they should be looking at it more closely. Oops.
Okay, so thank you for it. Also, I have another question for you. How do we ensure that journalists are competent to understand disaster as a subject or set a trial or error process? How can journalists and technocrats collaborate to bring a change during the crisis time?
Excellent question. Interesting question. Yes, I think one of the things that we don't have in most countries, in India, especially in Nepal, definitely, but also in the Western nations, it is also about the training. Actually, okay? The training needs to the kind of training that we provide needs to improve. Right now, pretty much everywhere, the kind of disaster training that's provided to journalists is limited to their physical safety. It's about risk assessment. It's about what you should do, whether you should be interviewing sensitively. It's to some extent it's about trauma and how to overcome that, etc. But the kind of training that I'm speaking about is rarely seen. It's about actually thinking about disasters much more broadly and expansively. It's about changing our journalism curriculum so that it's actually embedded in that. It's about having quite a persistent training for journalism within journalism organization also. So all those things need to be put in place, and it's not going to happen overnight, but it's something that we need to be working towards. Sorry, I can't hear you.
Sir, I have a question for Mr. Mayuran. I think he is online. Hello, sir. Hello.
This.
Hello.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, so what was done with those?
Yeah, hello.
From sir, hello.
Yes.
Sir, the question is, in your case, for example.
I hear you. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, for example, in your case in Sri Lanka, what was done with those suffering from serious post-traumatic stress disorder?
Yeah, it's very relevant that we have faced during the war, especially in 2009, like So in the last war, like which has started in 2005 to 2009, we identified many PTSD, many patients with PTSDs, and especially among the children. So we have started a special program which is attached to the National Institute of Mental Health in Sri Lanka. So the ministries have their own centers in the hospitals, and they have formed a group called Multidisciplinary Resource Team. So it is a team with relaxation experts and occupational therapists, and then various therapeutic personalities and psychiatric social workers, a team combined with that, and then they have done an assessment with service users, the clients, and their identify their requirements, and they have done a development plan, a rehabilitation plan for the service users, and they implemented collaboratively. So the collaborative action is the key to provide the service to the people who are affected with PTSD. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. Due to time constraint, we are stopping with this question and answer session. Also, to conclude, I would like to thank very much for Mr. Mayuran and Dr. Chinju Sridharan for sharing their knowledge and expertise with us. I hope this session has been very informative to all the students, professionals, lecturers who have attended this program. So, speaking about tomorrow, we have eminent speakers from NIDM, namely Mr. Raju Thapa, who will speak on Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction, SDGs, and climate change adaptation. And Mr. Anil Kahai will speak on the Prime Minister's 10-point agenda and National Disaster Management Plan guidelines. We also have a dialogue with Mr. Sunny Hofihi and Dr. Pun Solomon, who will talk on the effects of crisis and disaster on the vulnerable groups, Nigeria and India respectively. And also for your kind information of the participants, for those who are watching the program live on YouTube, please fill the attendance sheet which is being put in the comment section. And also for those watching it in Cisco Webex web, you need not worry about your attendance, it is automatically generated. So thank you and have a nice day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.